Hello there my RPG lovers and welcome to another video. Bleak Faith Forsaken is a new action RPG coming out on March 10th. I've been following the development of this game ever since 2019 and I made a couple of videos in the past. I got to play the first prototype back then and the first demo when it came out as well. The final version of the game looks almost unrecognizable. They obviously made some huge improvements. I was one of the testers for the game and I was giving my honest feedback to the developers every time I got to play the new demo. This game is still under embargo, so unfortunately I won't be able to show you any of my footage yet, even though I have 40 plus hours invested in the game so far. So don't expect me to be critical about Bleak Faith's features before the embargo lifts. I will have a review ready as soon as the embargo lifts, so stick around if you want to hear my full thoughts about the game. In this video, I'm going to talk about Bleak Faith's game design in general and what kind of a game you can expect if you decide to buy it when it releases on March 10th. So let's get straight into it, shall we? Bleak Faith Forsaken is definitely a really ambitious game, especially if you consider the fact that it was developed by only 3 people. I was really skeptical when I first learned about the game back in 2019. The prototype was not bad, but it was bare bones compared to the final version. Almost a year after the prototype we got a couple of demos, which I played a lot. And slowly but surely I started changing my mind about the whole thing. Fast forward a couple of years, I invested a lot of hours into the final version of the game and I'm still not done. So what's Bleak Faith all about? Well, it's an open world action RPG which doesn't hold your hand at all. Even though I love that approach to game design, it can be a double-edged sword if not done properly, but I think Bleak Faith did a good job when it comes to this. You could definitely put this game into Soulsborne category, because it shares a lot of similar design ideas with From Software games. I would compare it to Dark Souls 1 when it comes to level design at least, even though the open world in Bleak Faith is much bigger. However, every single area in Bleak Faith is highly interconnected, with a lot of shortcuts you can unlock, just like in Dark Souls 1. Even the first area immediately gives you 3 different paths to choose, and I somehow managed to miss 2 of them when I first started playing. After exploring the whole first area, I had the same feeling like I did when I first played Dark Souls 1. You feel very confused at first with all the shortcuts, but when it all clicks with you, it feels amazing. You can spend a lot of time going in one direction just to end up on the same place you started, or find a completely new area. So it's not just a light version of Dark Souls 1 level design, like some of the Soulsborne games I've tried over the years. This kind of level design just wouldn't work without the verticality. Almost every single zone you discover in Bleak Faith has a very vertical design. Speaking about discovering new zones, you could easily miss some optional areas. I missed a huge area that can be explored early on, and I discovered it later on accident. And of course, that also means you'll miss some optional boss fights, armor sets and weapons. Actually, some of these optional areas are not even meant to be found early on, because the enemies can be a lot harder to kill. You should take a hint when that happens, because that usually means you need to get stronger and come back later. But of course, if you have the skill, you can beat the whole game with the first club you get in the beginning. Speaking of that, the character progression in Bleak Faith is definitely one of its better features, but let's talk about the combat system first. Bleak Faith has an action combat system where the weapon you're using will possibly shape your entire playstyle. Almost all weapons you find in the game have unique active and passive skills on them, but also different movesets. Some weapon types share the same moveset, but I don't believe that any of them share the same abilities. Pretty much every playstyle you can think of is possible with the right weapon. There are swords, great swords, axes, hammers, staves, daggers, twin blades, scythes, shields, and probably some more that I missed. All of these abilities use flux as a resource, which is basically just a mana bar. And just like any other character stat, it can be improved with different gear pieces. So if you wanna be a mage or use a lot of abilities, you'll need to focus on that stat in particular. Same goes for character resistances. If one of your stats is noticeably lower, you can easily get killed by the enemy who can inflict that damage. I had a fully upgraded heavy armor set, but low technomancy stats, so even the most basic mages in the game could easily one-shot me with spells. There are some crazy abilities on weapons, by the way, and some more grounded effects, which can help you with your desired playstyle. When it comes to the general feel of the combat, it all comes down to learning the combo system, because when you do it right, you spend less stamina. And of course, you can expect some common mechanics, like in all third-person action RPGs nowadays, like step dodging, rolling and parry mechanic. But Bleak Faith also has some not so common mechanics, like being able to climb on big enemies and stab them in the back. Actually, that's one of the essential mechanics in the game when you're fighting bigger enemies. I was trying to master the parry mechanic because it feels very satisfying when you pull it off. The parry window seems quite generous though. All weapons and shields in the game can parry, but you can't parry bosses. You won't have to wait for long to fight your first boss in the game, but you can also fully explore the zone before you do that. And I would highly recommend doing that, because the gear in the game is very important. Another thing I noticed is that the game will spawn new enemies in zones that you already discovered. This starts happening after you kill a specific boss in the game. It gives you a reason to explore the older zones again and possibly get some new gear. Bleak Faith doesn't have any character levels, it's all about the gear your character is using. Despite that, you have a bunch of RPG stats for a character, and they're actually really important. However, they can only be affected by the gear you're wearing. When it comes to skills, every time you kill a boss in this game, you'll get a perk point you can use. The game gives you a decent amount of different perks, and all of them have at least a couple of sub-perks you can choose. Perks can improve a specific playstyle quite a bit, but like I said, this will highly depend on the weapon you're using. Besides perks, you'll get to choose a couple of permanent abilities, which are RNG drops as far as I'm aware. There is one particular quality of life feature related to looting. You won't be able to loot any duplicates. Every time you loot a new armor piece or a weapon, it feels really exciting because you know it's a brand new item that you didn't have before. Bleak Faith makes it really easy to switch up your playstyle because there is no commitment with the character stats. Since you're not leveling and investing your points into strength, stamina or any other stat, you can easily switch them up just by equipping new armors and weapons. Bleak Faith allows you to have up to 4 weapons on your character at once. Well, 2 weapons if you choose to carry a couple of two-handed weapons. You can see all of your equipped weapons on your back, which is a really nice touch. Weapons and armors are upgradable, and this will be very important actually. The crafting is almost essential, but it's very straightforward. You won't be able to find a fully upgraded item in the game, you have to craft it yourself. In order to do that, you need to visit a certain NPC in the hub area and have the required materials. Yeah, I forgot to mention that there is a hub area in the game that you'll discover shortly after the first zone. Speaking of NPCs, there are few and far between. As you would probably expect in a game of this type, the story is not exactly told in a linear way, you'll have to piece everything together by yourself. The environmental storytelling is pretty strong in Bleak Faith as well. I think that will be everything I can share with you about the game, at least for now. By the time I'm done with the review, I'll probably have a lot more hours invested, and I'll be free to talk about every positive and negative thing about the game, like I usually do. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the review, and maybe check out the other content on the channel. I cover a lot of all the new RPGs with various videos. You can watch my recent series of videos where I go back and revisit some forgotten and obscure RPGs and action adventures. Anyway guys, thanks for watching the video. Don't forget to press the thumbs up button, and subscribing to the channel would mean a lot. If you wanna go a step further, you can always become a Patreon or a YouTube member. Even the smallest support a month means a lot. That will be all, and I'll see you in the next one.